The heavy wooden doors of St. Andrew's Church stood before me, and through the stained glass, I could hear the organ playing. My grandson's baptism was about to begin. I adjusted my best suit jacket, the one I'd bought specifically for this day, and reached for the brass handle. That's when my daughter Elizabeth stepped out, blocking my path. "Dad, there's no place for you," she said loud enough for the arriving guests to hear. 200 people turned to stare as I stood there frozen. "All right then, sweetheart." I managed to say, my voice steady, despite the crushing weight in my chest. I turned and walked back to my car, already reaching for my phone. 6 months earlier, I would have called myself the luckiest man in Pine Valley. At 68 years old, I had built Brennan Construction from a single pickup truck into the largest commercial contractor in 3 counties. My wife Helen had passed 5 years ago from cancer, and while that loss nearly destroyed me, I found purpose in being the best father and grandfather I could be. Elizabeth was my only child, the light of my life since the day she was born 38 years ago. I'd raised her alone after Helen died when Elizabeth was 33, and we'd grown even closer through our shared grief. At least, that's what I believed. When she married Richard Lawson 4 years ago, I welcomed him like a son. Richard came from old money, his family owning half the commercial real estate downtown. I thought nothing of it when he suggested Elizabeth quit her job as a pediatric nurse to focus on starting a family. When my grandson James was born last year, I became the grandfather every child dreams of having. I converted my home office into a nursery for his visits. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I'd pick him up early morning while Elizabeth ran errands or met friends for lunch. We'd spend hours in my workshop, where I'd crafted a wooden rocking horse hand-carved alphabet blocks, and was halfway through building a miniature replica of the house where Elizabeth grew up. I established a college fund the day James was born, starting it with $50,000. By the time he'd need it, compound interest would ensure he could attend any university he chose. I bought a small lake cabin an hour north, envisioning summers teaching him to fish, just as I'd taught Elizabeth. The walls were already filling with photos of our adventures, his first time touching grass, his delighted squeals when he saw the ducks at Miller Pond, the afternoon he fell asleep on my chest, while I read him stories about knights and dragons. But something shifted after Richard's father died last winter. Douglas Lawson left behind an estate worth $40 million, and suddenly Richard inherited not just wealth, but also his father's seat on several influential boards. Their Tudor-style house, already impressive, underwent massive renovations. Elizabeth started shopping at stores where a simple dress cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. She hired a full-time nanny, though she wasn't working. She joined the Fairmont Country Club, where membership fees alone ran $25,000 annually. The changes came gradually. Tuesday visits became every other Tuesday. Thursday afternoons shortened to Thursday mornings. "James needs consistency," Elizabeth explained. "The child development expert says too many caregivers can be confusing." I didn't argue. Maybe she was right. I'd raised her with instinct and love, but perhaps modern parenting required more structure. When she mentioned the baptism was being planned, I offered to help. "That's sweet, Dad, but we've hired an event coordinator, Muffy Ashford. You know, she organized the governor's daughter's wedding." I didn't know Muffy Ashford, but I smiled and said that sounded wonderful. I asked about the date, and she waved her hand dismissively. "Sometime in autumn. We'll let you know." Autumn came faster than expected. The leaves had just started turning when my phone rang on a Tuesday morning. Elizabeth sounded breathless, excited. "Dad, the baptism is this Sunday. Can you believe how fast Muffy pulled it together? 2 o'clock at St. Andrew's. 4 days' notice for the baptism of my only grandchild." I swallowed my hurt and assured her I'd be there. I spent the rest of the week preparing. I had my suit cleaned and pressed. I polished my shoes until they gleamed like mirrors. I wrapped the gift I'd been saving, a silver cross that had belonged to my grandfather, passed down through 4 generations of Brennan men. Helen had kept it in her jewelry box, waiting for the day we'd have a grandson. The jeweler had cleaned it until it sparkled, and I'd had it engraved on the back, "To James with love from Grandpa Gustav. May you always walk in faith." Sunday morning arrived crisp and clear, one of those perfect October days, when the sky seems impossibly blue. I arrived at St. Andrew's 30 minutes early, parking in the back lot, to leave the closer spaces for other guests. The church looked magnificent with white roses and baby's breath adorning every pew. Through the open doors, I could see the baptismal font draped in white silk, golden candlelight flickering across its surface. Guests began arriving in waves. I recognized many faces from the country club, though I knew few names. Richard's family came in a convoy of Mercedes and BMWs. Elizabeth's new friends, women who lunched while nannies raised their children, glided in, wearing designer dresses and shoes that cost more than some cars. I stood near the entrance, greeting those I knew, smiling at strangers, my heart swelling with pride. My grandson was being welcomed into the faith, surrounded by luxury I never could have imagined providing. Richard emerged from a side door, adjusting his Italian suit. He saw me and paused, something unreadable crossing his face. He didn't approach, just nodded curtly and disappeared back inside. A moment later, Elizabeth appeared in the doorway. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than I'd spent on her entire childhood wardrobe, her hair styled in an elaborate updo adorned with pearls. She looked beautiful, but unfamiliar, like a stranger wearing my daughter's face. She walked toward me with purpose, and for a moment, I thought she was coming to escort me to my seat. Maybe they'd saved me a place of honor, as befitting the baby's only living grandparent. Instead, she stopped 3 feet away, far enough that she had to raise her voice slightly. That should have been my first warning. Elizabeth never raised her voice unless she wanted to be overheard. "Dad," she began, and her tone made my stomach clench. "We need to talk." "Of course, sweetheart. Should we step aside?" "No, this is fine." She glanced around, and I noticed how conversations near us had quieted. "There's been a change in arrangements." "What kind of change?" She lifted her chin, a gesture I recognized from her teenage years, when she was about to deliver news she knew I wouldn't like. "The ceremony is for immediate family only." "I am immediate family. I'm James's grandfather." "Immediate family means the parents and godparents. Richard's brother is the godfather, and my friend Stephanie is the godmother. The church is quite small, as you can see. We've had to limit attendance." I looked past her at the church, which could easily hold 300 people. Even with the elaborate flower arrangements, there was ample space. "Elizabeth, I don't understand." She sighed, as if I were being deliberately obtuse. "Dad, this is a Fairmont Country Club event. The reception is at the club, and you're not a member. Since when do you need to be a member to attend a private event? I've been to weddings there." Those were different circumstances. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Richard feels... That is, we feel it would be awkward. His family doesn't know you, and frankly, you wouldn't have anything in common with our guests." The words hit like physical blows, each one precisely aimed. My daughter, whom I'd raised alone after her mother's death, whom I'd supported through college and nursing school, whose wedding I'd paid for in full, was telling me I wasn't good enough to attend my grandson's baptism. "I see," I said quietly. "And this decision was made when—" "Does it matter?" She shifted impatiently. "The point is, the arrangements are finalized. The programs are already printed. Without my name. Dad, don't make this difficult. You know I love you, but Richard and I need to think about James's future. The connections we're making today could open doors for him that you and I never had access to. I never knew a grandfather's love could close doors." Her face flushed. "That's not fair. You can see James anytime. Every other Tuesday for 2 hours. You know that's not true." But we both knew it was. "Look, Dad, I need to get inside. The ceremony is starting soon." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the wrapped silver cross. "Will you at least give this to James? It was my grandfather's." She looked at the simple wrapping paper clearly from a regular store, not the high-end boutiques she now frequented. "That's sweet, Dad. But we've already selected a baptism gift. Tiffany's designed a custom piece." I stood there holding 4 generations of Brennan family history, watching my daughter dismiss it as insufficient. Around us, guests continued to file into the church. Some stared openly, clearly enjoying the drama. Others pretended not to notice, which was somehow worse. I saw Barbara Henley, whose husband's construction company I'd helped save from bankruptcy 10 years ago, avert her eyes and hurry past. "There's no place for you, Dad," Elizabeth repeated louder this time. The words carried across the church steps. 200 faces turned our way, some sympathetic, most simply curious. I felt like an actor who'd forgotten his lines standing center stage while the audience waited. I looked at my daughter one last time, searching for any trace of the little girl who used to fall asleep in my arms, who cried on my shoulder when boys broke her heart, who still called me every Sunday until 6 months ago. This elegant stranger stared back, impatient and unmoved. "All right then, sweetheart," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I'll go." I turned and walked back toward the parking lot, my footsteps echoing on the stone pathway. Behind me, I heard the whispers, starting the speculation about what kind of father gets barred from his grandchild's baptism. My hands shook as I fumbled for my keys. The silver cross sat heavy in my pocket, its weight a reminder of all the traditions that would end with me. Sliding into my truck, the same Ford F-150 I'd driven for 8 years, I sat for a moment, engine off, trying to process what had just happened. Through the rearview mirror, I watched Elizabeth disappear into the church without a backward glance. The heavy doors closed with a sound like thunder. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I'd saved but never expected to use. Marcus Webb had served with me in Vietnam, survived 2 tours together before coming home to build careers on opposite sides of the law. While I went into construction, Marcus became one of the most successful private investigators in the state. We still met for coffee monthly, 2 old soldiers swapping war stories and grandchildren photos. "Marcus," I said when he answered on the second ring. "It's Gustav Brennan. I need your help." Marcus met me at my house within an hour, finding me in my study surrounded by photo albums and financial documents. He took one look at my face and poured us both whiskey from the bottle I kept for special occasions, though this hardly qualified as celebratory. "Tell me everything," he said, settling into the leather chair across from my desk. I started from the beginning, from Richard's inheritance, to the gradual distance, to today's humiliation. Marcus listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes in a small black notebook. When I finished, he leaned back, studying me with the same intense focus that had kept us alive in jungle ambushes. "First question," he said. "What do you want? Revenge, reconciliation? Just answers? I want to know why my daughter suddenly acts like I'm something scraped off her shoe. This isn't about money, Marcus. I've got more than I could spend in 2 lifetimes. This is about understanding what changed." Marcus nodded. "People don't change overnight without reason. Either something happened you don't know about, or someone's been dripping poison in her ear. Given the timing with the inheritance, I'm betting on the latter." He paused, considering. "You willing to let me dig deep? Once I start turning over rocks, you might not like what crawls out." "I've already lost her," I said. "At least this way I'll know why." We spent the next 3 hours developing a plan. Marcus would investigate Richard's background, his family's business dealings, and any potential influences on Elizabeth. I gave him access to financial records, social media accounts I barely used, but Elizabeth posted on constantly, and contact information for mutual friends who'd also been frozen out recently. "There's something else," I said as he prepared to leave. "I want everything documented. Videos, recordings, paper trails. If there's something sinister happening, I want proof that would hold up in court." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You planning legal action?" "I'm planning to be prepared for anything." That night, sleep eluded me entirely. I wandered my empty house, stopping in the nursery I'd prepared for James. The rocking horse stood silent in the moonlight, its carved eyes seeming to mirror my confusion. I picked up the wooden blocks, running my fingers over letters I'd sanded smooth with my own hands. On the shelf sat books I'd been collecting, classics my mother read to me, new stories about adventures and friendship, all waiting for a little boy who might never hear them in his grandfather's voice. Monday morning brought a call from my foreman about a problem at our Riverside Plaza project, but I couldn't focus on work. Instead, I drove to St. Andrew's parking across the street. The church looked different in weekday clothes, stripped of Sunday's finery. I convinced myself I wasn't being morbid, just seeking closure. That's when I saw Father Michael emerging from the rectory. We'd known each other for 20 years, ever since I'd donated materials and labor to rebuild the church's community center after a fire. He saw me and hesitated, then walked over with the measured steps of a man approaching a difficult conversation. "Gustav," he said, genuine sorrow in his voice. "I heard about yesterday. News travels fast. 200 witnesses tend to have that effect." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want you to know I argued against the decision. Told them a baptism should unite families, not divide them." "Them?" Father Michael glanced around, then leaned closer. "The Lawson family made a very generous donation to secure the church for a private ceremony. They provided their own guest list. When I saw your name wasn't on it, I questioned it. Richard assured me you'd been invited to a private family ceremony earlier." "There was no earlier ceremony. I performed no such service." His face darkened. "I don't appreciate being made complicit in deception, Gustav. Had I known the truth, I would have refused." We talked for several more minutes. Father Michael revealed that the Lawsons had essentially rented the church like a venue, treating the sacred ceremony as another society event. They'd even tried to dictate parts of the service, requesting shorter prayers to leave more time for photographs. I drove home with new questions churning. Why had Richard lied to Father Michael? What required such elaborate deception? My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. "Marcus, you free to meet?" he asked. "I've found some interesting preliminary information." We met at a small diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where construction workers grabbed breakfast, and nobody from the country club would ever venture. Marcus slid a folder across the cracked Formica table. "Richard Lawson isn't who he presents himself to be," Marcus began. "On paper, he's golden. Ivy League education, inherited wealth, respectable business holdings. But dig deeper, and cracks appear." I opened the folder, finding financial documents and business registrations. "What kind of cracks?" His father left him the estate, but it came with massive debts. The old man lived like he still had 1960s money in a 21st century economy. Richard inherited $40 million in assets and $38 million in liabilities. He's been scrambling to stay afloat while maintaining appearances. That explains the rush to renovate the house, create an image of wealth. Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. Marcus pulled out another document. 6 months ago, Richard started a new company, Lawson Family Investments. Guess who's listed as a principal investor? I read the paperwork, my blood running cold. Elizabeth. She doesn't have any money to invest. No, but you do. And as your only heir, she's been using projected inheritance as collateral for loans. She's borrowed against her future inheritance from you. The room seemed to spin. That's not possible. She'd need my death certificate, or at least power of attorney. Or, Marcus said quietly, she'd need to convince lenders you're not mentally competent to manage your affairs, that your assets would soon be under her control. I stared at him, pieces clicking into place. The accusations of forgetfulness, the reduction in visits, the public humiliation. She's building a case that I'm senile. That's my theory. I've got more digging to do. But Gustav, you need to protect yourself. Document everything. Record conversations when legal. And maybe talk to your lawyer about safeguarding your assets. I left the diner, feeling nauseated. My own daughter, the child I'd raised with boundless love, was apparently orchestrating my destruction for money. But knowing Marcus, I understood this was just the tip of the iceberg. He had that look he used to get in Vietnam when he sensed an ambush ahead. That evening, I sat in my study drafting a letter to Elizabeth. I wrote about her childhood, about the father-daughter dances, the camping trips, the nights I'd held her through heartbreak. I wrote about my love for her and James, my confusion about recent events, my door always remaining open. I sealed it, addressed it, then locked it in my desk drawer. Something told me I'd need documentation of my attempts at reconciliation. The week passed in a blur of meetings with lawyers and financial advisors. On Marcus's advice, I began restructuring my assets, moving money into trusts that couldn't be touched without my explicit consent. I updated my will with precise language about mental competency requirements. I installed a security system with cameras, telling myself it was for safety, not surveillance. Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Barbara Henley stood on my doorstep, the same woman who'd averted her eyes at the church. She clutched her purse like a shield, clearly uncomfortable. "May I come in, Gustav? There's something you should know." I led her to the living room, noting how she perched on the edge of the sofa, as if ready to flee. "Coffee?" "No, thank you. I won't stay long. My conscience won't let me remain silent." She took a deep breath. "There's talk at the country club. About you." "What kind of talk?" "Elizabeth and Richard have been telling people you're showing signs of dementia, that you've become paranoid aggressive, that they've had to limit your access to James for safety reasons." Each word felt like a physical blow. Safety reasons. Richard claims you nearly dropped the baby during a visit, that you forgot you were holding him and stood up to answer the phone. Barbara's eyes filled with tears. "I know it's not true, Gustav. I remember how you held Elizabeth when she was small, how careful you always were. But people believe what they want to believe, especially when it comes from someone like Richard Lawson." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you saved our company when nobody else would help. Because I've watched you build half this town with integrity and kindness. Because what they're doing is wrong, and I'm ashamed I stayed silent at the church." She stood abruptly. "I should go before someone sees my car here." "Barbara," I called as she reached the door. "Thank you." She paused, not turning around. "Be careful, Gustav. The Lawsons play for keeps." After she left, I sat in gathering darkness, processing this confirmation of my worst fears. My daughter wasn't just freezing me out. She was actively destroying my reputation, laying groundwork for something larger. The question was what, and how far would she go? My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Found something big. Can't discuss over phone. Tomorrow, usual place 10 a.m. I stared at the message, wondering what could be worse than what I already knew. Outside, October, wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in this same town, my grandson was being put to bed by strangers, while my daughter counted money that wasn't yet hers. The rocking horse creaked in the empty nursery upstairs, a sound like mourning. Marcus arrived at the diner, looking grim, carrying a locked briefcase that he placed carefully on the table between us. The morning crowd had thinned, leaving us relatively alone in our corner booth. "Before I show you this," he began, "I need you to understand something. I've been doing this job for 30 years. I've seen every kind of family betrayal imaginable. But this," he shook his head, "this is calculated beyond anything I expected." My coffee grew cold as he opened the briefcase, revealing photographs, bank statements, and what appeared to be medical documents. The first photo showed Elizabeth entering a building I didn't recognize. The timestamp read 3 months ago. "That's the office of Dr. Harrison Vance," Marcus explained. "He's a psychiatrist who specializes in competency evaluations for elder law cases. Very expensive, very discreet, and very willing to provide whatever diagnosis his clients need." The next photos showed Elizabeth leaving the same building on multiple dates, sometimes with Richard, once with a man in an expensive suit I didn't recognize. Marcus identified him as Alan Griffith, an attorney who specialized in guardianship cases. Here's where it gets interesting. Marcus continued pulling out bank records. Elizabeth has been paying Dr. Vance $5,000 per visit. But here's the thing. He's never met you. He's preparing a competency evaluation on you, based solely on what Elizabeth and Richard tell him. My hands trembled as I studied the documents. There it was in black and white preliminary diagnostic notes, suggesting progressive dementia, recommending immediate intervention for the patient's safety and financial security. They're building a case to have you declared incompetent, Marcus said unnecessarily. With Dr. Vance's evaluation and testimony from country club members about your erratic behavior, they could petition the court for guardianship. How long have they been planning this? Based on the paper trail, at least 4 months. Right after Richard realized the depth of his father's debts. Marcus pulled out another set of documents. But Gustav, that's not the worst part. I couldn't imagine what could be worse, but Marcus's expression told me to brace myself. He handed me a photocopy of what looked like a life insurance document. 3 months ago, Elizabeth took out a life insurance policy on you. $5 million with herself as sole beneficiary. She's been paying the premiums from the joint account you set up for emergencies. The diner seemed to tilt. I gripped the table edge, forcing myself to breathe. She's using my own money to ensure my death. The policy has an interesting clause. Marcus continued relentlessly. In case of death by accident or natural causes within the first 2 years, the payout doubles. $10 million. You're suggesting my daughter is planning to kill me. I'm suggesting she's created a scenario where your death would be extremely profitable. Whether she's planning anything or just preparing for possibilities. He shrugged. That's above my pay grade. I stared at the evidence spread before me, each document another nail in the coffin of my relationship with Elizabeth. The little girl who once cried when I got a paper cut was now betting on my death. There's more, Marcus said softly. I had my tech guy do some digging into their phones and computers. Legal gray area, but given the circumstances. He produced printed screenshots of text messages between Elizabeth and Richard. My stomach churned as I read. Richard. How was the old fool today? Elizabeth, same as always. Pathetic. Still thinks his little wooden toys mean something. Richard. 6 more months, baby. Then we're free. Elizabeth. Can't happen soon enough. I'm tired of pretending I care about his boring stories. Another exchange from last week. Elizabeth. He bought more books for James today. As if we'd ever read that garage sale garbage to our son. Richard. Let him waste his money. Soon, it'll all be ours anyway. Elizabeth. I made sure to mention his confusion at the club yesterday. Barbara Henley looked concerned. Perfect witness. I pushed the papers away, unable to read more. When did she start hating me, Marcus? What did I do? You didn't do anything, he said firmly. This isn't about you. It's about money and status. Richard got his hooks into her, convinced her that your blue-collar success was something to be ashamed of, that she deserved better than a construction worker's daughter's life. I gave her everything. You gave her love and values. Richard offered her a different currency, prestige acceptance into his world. But that world costs more than he can afford, so they targeted the one person who had what they needed. We sat in silence while I absorbed the magnitude of the betrayal. Then, Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping. Gustav, I need to tell you something else. My guy found searches on Richard's computer. He's been researching accidental deaths in the elderly. Falls medication errors, carbon monoxide poisoning. All searches dated within the last month. The coffee cup slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the floor. The waitress rushed over, but I barely noticed her cleaning up, barely heard Marcus apologizing, barely felt anything beyond the crushing weight of realization. My daughter, my Elizabeth, was possibly planning my murder. What do I do? I asked when the waitress had gone. You protect yourself. Install more cameras, never be alone with them. Document everything. And Gustav. He reached across the table, gripping my shoulder. You fight back. Not physically, God knows. But you're a strategic man. You built an empire from nothing. Use those same skills now. To what end? I've already lost her. To survive. To protect yourself. And maybe, just maybe, to save your daughter from herself. Because if they go through with this and get caught, and they will get caught, Elizabeth goes to prison. James grows up visiting his mother behind bars. That image, my grandson in a prison visiting room, cut through my fog of self-pity. Marcus was right. This was bigger than my broken heart. What do you suggest? A slow smile crossed his weathered face. Remember that ambush near Da Nang, when we were outnumbered 5-1? We convinced them we were a much larger force. Psychological warfare. Exactly. They think you're weak, isolated, and easy mark. What if we show them otherwise? We spent the next 2 hours strategizing. I'd transfer the bulk of my assets into an irrevocable trust, making myself essentially judgment-proof. I'd hire a prominent attorney, someone whose reputation would make the Lawsons think twice. Most importantly, I'd begin my own documentation campaign, creating an undeniable record of my mental competence. One more thing, Marcus said as we prepared to leave. You need to change your will immediately. Leave everything to charity if necessary. Take away their motivation. What about James? He's innocent in this. Set up an educational trust that kicks in at 18. Nothing Elizabeth can touch, nothing that benefits her or Richard. Make sure they know about it. Remove the profit from your death. I drove home feeling strangely energized. For weeks I'd been a victim, confused and hurt by Elizabeth's behavior. Now I understood the game, even if the players broke my heart. The question was, how far was I willing to go to protect myself from my own daughter? That night, I made several phone calls. First to Thomas Brennan, no relation despite the shared surname, the most feared estate attorney in the state. He agreed to see me the next morning. Then to Dr. Patricia Morse, a renowned neurologist who could provide an independent cognitive evaluation. Finally, to Father Michael. I need a favor, I said after explaining the situation. Would you be willing to write a statement about our conversations, about my mental state during our discussions? Gustav, what you're describing, are you certain this sounds like something from a movie? I have documentation, Father. I'm certain. He sighed heavily. I'll write the statement. And Gustav, I'll be praying for your family. All of your family. After hanging up, I walked through my house, seeing it with new eyes. The photographs on the walls showed a happy family that no longer existed. Elizabeth's graduation, her wedding, James's birth. All moments when I'd thought our bond was unbreakable. I left them hanging. They were evidence too proof of what we'd once been. In the nursery, I picked up the silver cross still in my pocket from the baptism. 4 generations of Brennan men had carried it. It seemed the line would end with me, at least in spirit, if not in blood. I placed it carefully in my safe, along with the growing pile of evidence Marcus had gathered. My phone rang just after midnight. Elizabeth's name on the caller ID made my heart race, but I let it go to voicemail. Her message was brief. Dad, I heard you've been asking questions about me around town. I don't appreciate you spreading rumors. If you're having episodes of paranoia, maybe we should discuss treatment options. Call me. I saved the message. More evidence. Then I activated the new recording app Marcus had installed, the one that would automatically save all phone conversations. If my daughter wanted to play games with my life, she'd find I still had some moves of my own. Thunder rolled across Pine Valley as I finally went to bed, and I wondered if Elizabeth heard it too. Did she lie awake, planning my demise? Or did she sleep peacefully, convinced her scheme was foolproof? Either way, tomorrow would begin my counteroffensive. The construction worker's daughter had forgotten one crucial thing: her father had built his success by being smarter, tougher, and more strategic than anyone expected. The rocking horse stood silent in the darkness, waiting for a child who might never rock in it. But I'd be damned if I'd let it become evidence at my murder trial. Thomas Brennan's office occupied the top floor of the Meridian Tower, with windows overlooking the entire valley. Despite sharing a surname, we'd only met at charity functions, where his commanding presence and sharp intellect had made strong impressions. Now, sitting across from his massive mahogany desk, I appreciated why corporate executives feared him. "I've reviewed the documents you sent," he said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "This is one of the most calculated cases of potential elder abuse I've encountered. Your daughter and son-in-law have been remarkably thorough in their preparation." "Can you help me?" "Mr. Brennan, Gustav, I built my reputation defending people from predators. The fact that these particular predators share your DNA doesn't change my approach." He pulled out a legal pad. "First, we restructure everything immediately. By Monday, you'll be judgment-proof." We spent 3 hours crafting a financial fortress. The bulk of my assets would transfer to an irrevocable trust, with multiple trustees, including Thomas himself. My company would restructure with a board of directors, removing me from direct control while ensuring continued income. A separate educational trust for James would be established with ironclad provisions, preventing Elizabeth or Richard from accessing funds. "Now," Thomas said, "let's discuss offense. We're filing a preemptive motion with the court, acknowledging the attempts to have you declared incompetent. We'll include Dr. Morse's evaluation character statements and evidence of your continued business acumen. We'll make it impossible for them to ambush you with a competency hearing." "Won't that escalate things?" "They've already escalated by hiring hitmen in suits. We're just acknowledging the war they started." He leaned back, studying me. "There's something else. Given the evidence of research into accidental deaths, I recommend you hire personal security." "Bodyguards, that seems extreme. So does your daughter researching how to make your death look accidental. I know a discreet firm, former military and law enforcement. They'll blend into your life without drama." I agreed reluctantly. Within 48 hours, I had 2 rotating security personnel who looked more like construction workers than bodyguards. Mike Harrison, a former Marine, took days. Samuel Chen, despite my instructions about names Thomas had vouched for him, covered nights. Both had been briefed on the situation and took it seriously. Dr. Patricia Morse's evaluation took place that Friday. Unlike the phantom assessment Dr. Vance was preparing, this involved 6 hours of cognitive testing, brain scans, and extensive documentation. Her conclusion was unequivocal. At 68, I showed no signs of dementia or diminished capacity. In fact, my problem-solving scores ranked in the 95th percentile for men my age. "I'll testify to this in court if needed," she assured me. "What they're attempting is criminal." That weekend brought another test. Elizabeth called Saturday morning, her voice sweet as honey. "Dad, I feel terrible about the baptism. Would you like to come for dinner tomorrow? Just family, nothing fancy. You can spend time with James." Every instinct screamed trap, but I accepted. "What time?" 2 o'clock. James naps at 3, so you'll have quality time first." I arrived with Mike Harrison, who'd parked nearby and monitor my phone's GPS. The house looked even more ostentatious than I remembered, with new landscaping that probably cost more than most annual salaries. Elizabeth answered the door wearing a simple sundress, looking more like the daughter I remembered. "Dad." She hugged me, and I fought not to recoil. "I'm so glad you came. James has been asking for his grandpa." The lie rolled off her tongue so easily. James was barely verbal, just beginning to form words. Inside the house sparkled with new furnishings, every surface declaring wealth they didn't actually possess. Richard appeared from his study, all smiles and firm handshakes. "Gustav, good to see you. Can I get you a drink?" "Water's fine." I noticed the cameras immediately. New additions since my last visit, positioned to capture every angle of the living room. They wanted footage of something. James played on an expensive rug, surrounded by toys that looked untouched. When he saw me, his face lit up with genuine recognition. Ganpa! That single word nearly broke my resolve. I knelt beside him, helping stack blocks, while Elizabeth and Richard exchanged meaningful glances. 20 minutes into the visit, things became clear. Dad, Elizabeth said, perching on the sofa arm. We've been worried about you. Some friends mentioned you've seemed confused lately, forgetting conversations, repeating yourself. Really, which friends? She waved vaguely. Oh, several people at the club. And Father Michael mentioned you called him late at night, very agitated. A lie. I'd called Father Michael at 8 in the evening, completely calm. I don't recall being agitated. That's exactly what we mean, Richard interjected. You don't remember. Last week you apparently told Tom Morrison you were buying the country club. He said you insisted you'd already signed papers. Tom Morrison was Richard's golf buddy. I'd never spoken to him about anything beyond weather. That's not true. Dad denying it doesn't help. We have witnesses. Elizabeth pulled out her phone. I've been documenting incidents, like Thursday when you called me 17 times in an hour. She showed me a call log I knew was fabricated. I'd called her once Thursday, leaving a message she hadn't returned. The numbers on her screen showed calls from a number 1 digit off from mine. That's not my number, I pointed out. Dad, you're looking at it wrong, see? She pointed to the obviously different digits. You're transposing numbers. That's another symptom Dr. Vance mentioned. So they were already using the corrupt psychiatrist's name, testing my reaction. I kept my face neutral, while rage boiled underneath. My daughter was gaslighting me in real time, creating evidence for cameras she thought I hadn't noticed. Dr. Vance, a specialist in geriatric psychology. Richard knows him from the club. We thought maybe you could see him just for an evaluation. I'll consider it, I lied. The rest of the visit followed their script. Richard repeatedly asked me the same question, then acted concerned when I pointed out the repetition. Elizabeth moved objects when I wasn't looking, then asked why I'd put them in strange places. They were creating a scene for their camera's evidence of my supposed confusion. But I'd learned from masters. In Vietnam, the enemy often filmed propaganda, and we'd learned to subvert their narratives. I played along just enough to seem unaware, while carefully avoiding anything they could use. When Richard tried to hand me James while secretly loosening his grip, I maintained a hold that would register on camera as completely secure. When Elizabeth asked me to write a check for James's college fund, I wrote it perfectly, including the date and all details, making sure their cameras captured my steady hand and clear printing. We should do this more often, Elizabeth said as the visit ended. Maybe next week. I'd like that. I kissed James goodbye, memorizing his smell, the feel of his hair. Be good for mommy, buddy. In the truck, Mike Harrison listened to my account with professional calm. They're escalating. That whole show was about manufacturing evidence. They're amateurs, I said. Obvious tricks easily countered. They think I'm already half senile, so they're getting sloppy. Dangerous amateurs. Don't underestimate them. That night, I reviewed security footage from my own cameras. The visit looked exactly like what it was, a carefully orchestrated performance. I saved everything to multiple drives, building my counter case. If they wanted to play director, they'd find I could edit their narrative in ways they never expected. Monday morning brought unexpected allies. Barbara Henley called asking to meet privately. We chose a park on the far side of town, away from country club eyes. I've been talking to others, she said without preamble. People Richard and Elizabeth have approached about testifying to your supposed decline. Most are uncomfortable, but afraid to refuse. The Lawsons have influence. Who else have they contacted? She handed me a list. 12 names, all people who'd benefit from Richard's family connections. There's something else. My husband overheard Richard at the club. He was joking about how you'd probably have an accident soon, save everyone the trouble of a competency hearing. He said that publicly. After several drinks. But Gustav, the way he said it didn't sound like a joke. I thanked Barbara for her courage, and passed the information to both Thomas and Marcus. The net was tightening, but not around me. Every move Elizabeth and Richard made created more evidence of their conspiracy. They thought they were hunters. They didn't realize they'd become prey. That evening, I stood in my workshop, running my hands over the half-finished treehouse I'd been building for James. Every joint was perfect, every board selected for strength and beauty. It would outlast us all, this labor of love for a grandson I might never see again. But I'd finish it anyway. Hope demanded nothing less. The security cameras recorded everything, a man working steadily, purposefully, with no sign of confusion or decline. Just in case anyone wondered, I'd mounted a clock in clear view, showing I worked complex power tools safely well into the evening. Let them explain that to their corrupt doctor. The war for my life and sanity had begun in earnest. But I'd built my success on strong foundations and strategic thinking. My daughter had forgotten where she learned to be ruthless. Time to remind her that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and this tree had deep roots and iron bark. October faded into November, bringing shorter days and longer shadows. The leaves fell like casualties, while I continued my defensive campaign. Every interaction was documented, every conversation recorded where legal. My life became a stage where I performed competence for an audience of potential witnesses. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Richard's voice carried false warmth through the phone. "Gustav, hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Not at all. What can I do for you, Richard?" "Well, this is a bit awkward, but I've got a business proposition. Could we meet privately? I'd rather Elizabeth not know just yet. Want to surprise her if this works out." Every alarm in my head screamed, but I agreed. "Where and when?" "How about the Riverside construction site? I know you've got that project. Thursday evening, say 6, after the crews leave." "The Riverside Plaza. My largest current project, a 10-story commercial complex. Isolated after hours, multiple levels, heavy equipment everywhere. If someone wanted to arrange an accident, it offered countless opportunities." "Any particular reason for the location?" "I'm thinking about investing in development. Wanted to see your operation firsthand, maybe discuss a partnership. Your expertise, my capital." His capital that didn't exist. I agreed to the meeting and immediately called Mike Harrison. Within hours, we had a plan. Mike would be on site hidden. The security cameras we'd installed to prevent theft would be repositioned to cover every angle. Marcus would monitor from his van in the adjacent lot. If Richard planned something, we'd catch it all. Thursday arrived gray and drizzling. I spent the day as normal, reviewing plans with my foreman, checking progress, being visibly present and engaged. Word would filter back to the country club. Gustav Brennan, sharp as ever, running his empire without missing a beat. At 5:30, the last workers left. I sent my foreman home, making sure he logged my presence and mental state. "Boss is staying late to meet with a potential investor." He'd tell anyone who asked. Sharp as a tack, excited about expansion. Richard arrived at 6, precisely driving his Mercedes through the construction gate. He emerged wearing designer jeans and a leather jacket, playing at being a working man. I met him at the site trailer, noting how his eyes swept the area, checking for witnesses. "Gustav, thanks for meeting me. This is quite an operation." 40 years of growth, I said. "Started with one truck and a dream." "The American way." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mind giving me a tour? I'd love to see how it all works." We began walking through the site. Richard asked intelligent questions about construction, surprising me with his knowledge. He'd done homework, understanding enough to seem credible. We discussed profit margins, development costs, market projections. For 30 minutes, it felt almost normal. Two businessmen exploring opportunities. Then we reached the 5th floor. The concrete shell offered spectacular views of Pine Valley, but also exposed edges with 40-foot drops. Richard walked closer to the edge than safety protocols allowed, gesturing at the vista. "Amazing view. You must love seeing your mark on the skyline." "I prefer seeing families and homes I built. The skyline's just a side effect." He turned, studying me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold. Calculating. The mask slipping. You know Gustav Elizabeth worries about you up here. All these dangerous edges, heavy equipment. A man your age could easily have an accident. Good thing I'm careful. Careful, yes. But accidents happen. Like James's college fund getting mysteriously smaller. You did write that check correctly, didn't you? Elizabeth found it strange. The amount was wrong. I'd written the check for exactly the amount discussed, had carbon copy proof. The amount was correct. Was it Elizabeth says you wrote it for $50,000 instead of $5,000? Quite a discrepancy. The kind of mistake someone with diminishing capacity might make. I pulled out my phone, showing him the photo I'd taken of the check before giving it to Elizabeth. $5,000. Exactly as discussed. His face flushed. They'd altered the check, probably planning to present it as evidence of my confusion. My preparation had caught them off guard. You photographed a check to your grandson. I photograph all financial transactions. Have for years. Business habit. Richard moved closer to the edge, gesturing for me to join him. Let me show you something about the sightlines here. I stayed where I was. I can see fine from here. Come on, Gustav. Don't you trust your son-in-law? I trust evidence, Richard. Like the evidence that you've been researching accidental deaths in the elderly. Interesting reading material. He went very still. I don't know what you mean. Browser history's a funny thing. Even when you think you've deleted it, traces remain. Especially when you use company computers that back up to cloud servers. You're spying on me? Protecting myself. There's a difference. I pulled out my phone, pretending to check a message. In reality, I activated the recording app. Tell me, Richard, what kind of partnership were you actually proposing? His genial mask cracked completely. You think you're clever, don't you? The wise old builder outsmarting everyone. But you're just a lucky blue-collar laborer who got above his station. Interesting perspective from someone living on inherited money he doesn't actually have. How dare you? $40 million in assets, $38 million in debt. Your father left you a house of cards and you're scrambling to keep it standing. Only solution, marry well, and hope for a windfall. Except Elizabeth doesn't have money. I do. Richard stepped away from the edge, his hands clenching. She deserves better than being a construction worker's daughter. I'm offering her a life of culture sophistication, everything you couldn't provide. By planning to steal her inheritance early, by trying to have me declared incompetent, by researching how to kill me. Nobody's trying to kill you, old man. Though if you keep spreading lies, maybe someone should. There it was, recorded, a threat vague but present. Is that what you told Elizabeth? That I'm spreading lies? Or does she know about your research about the life insurance policy she took out? His face cycled through emotions. Surprise, calculation, rage. Elizabeth knows what she needs to know. That her father is showing signs of decline. That we need to protect James's future from your deteriorating judgment. By having secret meetings with Dr. Vance, a psychiatrist, who's never met me, but is preparing to testify about my mental state. You are paranoid. Maybe Elizabeth's right about you. Paranoid, or prepared. I pulled out a folder I'd brought. Cognitive Evaluation by Dr. Patricia Morse. Brain scans. Test results. All confirming perfect mental health. Signed statements from 20 business associates about my continued competence. Financial records showing complex transactions handled flawlessly. Your bot psychiatrist versus documented reality. How do you think that plays in court? Richard's face had gone pale. You've been planning this. Defending myself. Your move, Richard. But know this, I've transferred my assets to trusts you'll never touch. Changed my will to leave everything to charity, except for James's education fund. If I die tomorrow, you get nothing. If you have me declared incompetent, the trustees take over, not Elizabeth. You've already lost. You disinherit your own daughter. My daughter disappeared months ago. What's left is a stranger wearing her face, counting my money, and planning my funeral. The words hurt to say, but truth often does. Tell Elizabeth she has a choice. Stop this madness now, or face the consequences when your conspiracy unravels. Richard laughed an ugly sound. You think you've won. We've got witnesses to your erratic behavior, documentation of your confusion, friends willing to testify. Purchase testimony versus video evidence. Every visit to your house is recorded by your own cameras, showing me completely lucid while you two try to manufacture confusion. Today's conversation recorded. Your computer searches documented. The altered check photographed. Who do you think a judge believes? His phone rang. Elizabeth. He answered, turning away. I couldn't hear her words, but his responses told the story. No, I'm at the site. Yes, with your father. What do you mean? That's not possible. I'll be right there. He hung up, fury radiating from every line of his body. What did you do? Protected myself. Thomas Brennan filed papers today. Preemptive strike against your competency claim. Every piece of evidence attached. The court now has formal notice of your attempted elder abuse. Congratulations, Richard. You're officially under investigation. He lunged toward me, stopping just short of contact. Mike Harrison emerged from the stairwell, hand resting casually on his concealed weapon. Richard saw him and stepped back. This isn't over, he snarled. Yes, it is. Go home, Richard. Tell Elizabeth the game's up. If she wants any relationship with her father or son's grandfather, she'll drop this scheme immediately. Otherwise, I'll pursue criminal charges for fraud, elder abuse, and attempted murder. He stormed off, Mercedes tires squealing as he fled. Mike approached, scanning for threats. You okay? Better than I've been in months. It was true. Confronting the enemy, revealing my preparations, had lifted a weight I'd carried too long. Think they'll back down? Depends how desperate they are. Desperate people do stupid things. We secured the site and left in separate vehicles. At home, I found 17 missed calls from Elizabeth. I didn't return them. Let her stew in the consequences of her choices. Marcus called an hour later. Just monitored an interesting phone call. Elizabeth and Richard panicking about court papers. She's blaming him for pushing too hard. He's blaming her for being sloppy. Sounds like paradise in the Lawson house. Any threats? Not yet, but Richard mentioned calling Uncle Constantine. Mean anything? Constantine Lawson, Richard's father's brother. A man who'd made his fortune in ways nobody discussed at country clubs. If Richard was involving him, desperation had indeed set in. I made my own calls. First to Thomas, updating him on the confrontation. Then to the police, filing a report about Richard's veiled threat. Paper trails mattered. Finally, to Father Michael. Pray for them, I asked. They're about to face earthly judgment, but their souls need saving more than punishment. That night, sleep came easier than it had in months. The enemy was exposed, my defenses held, and truth was marching toward justice. In the nursery, the rocking horse waited in moonlight. I touched its mane, making a promise. Someday, James, when this ugliness passes, when your parents remember their humanity, you'll rock here while Grandpa tells you stories. Not about this darkness, but about building dreams and defending what matters. About how love sometimes means standing firm against those who've lost their way. The horse seemed to nod in the shadows, keeping faith when faith seemed impossible. Friday morning arrived with unexpected silence. No calls from Elizabeth, no threats from Richard, just autumn rain drumming against windows. The calm felt ominous, like the pause before artillery fire. I spent the morning at the office maintaining normal routines while Mike Harrison shadowed my movements. At noon, Thomas Brennan called. Constantine Lawson just left my office. Richard's uncle, what did he want? To negotiate. Seems the family council convened last night. Constantine's not pleased about Richard dragging the Lawson name into a potential criminal case. He offered a deal. I'm listening. They'll drop all competency claims, return The stolen funds dissolve the life insurance policy. In exchange, you drop criminal charges and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Clean break, everyone walks away. What about James' visitation rights? Thomas sighed. Once monthly supervised visits. Take it or leave it. Monthly supervised. He's my grandson, not a paroled criminal. I know, but Constantine made clear this is their only offer. Push harder, and they'll scorched earth this whole thing. His words, not mine. I stared out my office window at Riverside Plaza, rising against gray skies. 40 years of building, creating, succeeding, and my own daughter offered me supervised visits like I was dangerous. The injustice burned, but strategy mattered more than emotion. Tell him I'll consider it. Give me the weekend. After hanging up, I sat in silence weighing options. Accept the deal and see James occasionally, or fight and risk losing him entirely. The choice seemed obvious, until my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Barbara Henley. Something's happening at Elizabeth's. Ambulance just arrived. My heart stopped. Despite everything, she was still my daughter. I called Mike, and we raced across town, arriving as paramedics loaded someone into the ambulance. Not Elizabeth. Richard. He lay on the gurney, face gray, clutching his chest. Elizabeth stood in the doorway, still in her nightgown, mascara streaking her cheeks. She saw me and crumbled. Daddy! That single word, spoken like the little girl she'd once been, shattered my resolve. I rushed to her, catching her as she collapsed into my arms. She sobbed against my chest, while neighbors gathered on manicured lawns witnessing the Lawson family's public disintegration. What happened? Heart attack, they think. He just collapsed. We were arguing about the court papers and he grabbed his chest. She pulled back, searching my face. I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this. Shh, not now. Where's James? With the nanny, upstairs napping. You should go with Richard. I'll stay with James. She nodded, grabbing her coat. Daddy, I know you hate me, but I don't hate you, Elizabeth. I never could. We'll talk later. Go. The ambulance left, and I entered the house that had become a battlefield. The nanny, a young woman named Carla, looked relieved to see a familiar face. I sent her home, then checked on James. He slept peacefully, unaware his world was imploding. I called Mike to secure the perimeter, then sat in the living room where they'd tried to gaslight me weeks earlier. The cameras still watched, recording this reversal. The hunter becoming the hunted, the schemer undone by his own black heart. Marcus arrived an hour later. Heard about Richard. Karma. Stress more likely. 40-year-old men shouldn't play games they can't win. Speaking of games, he handed me a flash drive. Pulled this from their home computer an hour ago. You need to see it. I inserted the drive into my laptop, finding a folder labeled Insurance. Inside were documents that made my blood freeze. Not just the life insurance on me, but policies on 3 other people, Richard's mother, an aunt in Florida, and Elizabeth herself. All purchased in the last year, all with suspiciously high payouts. He was planning multiple murders, I whispered. Or creating options. The aunt died 6 months ago. Officially a stroke, but now we wonder, what about his mother? Nursing home in Connecticut. Might be worth warning them. I stared at evidence of evil beyond my comprehension. My daughter had married a potential serial killer, someone who viewed human life as financial opportunities. The scope of danger she'd been in, that James lived under, staggered me. Elizabeth called 2 hours later. He's stable. Triple bypass tomorrow. The doctors say... Her voice broke. They found cocaine in his system. Daddy, I didn't know he was using. Cocaine and stress, a deadly combination for someone with a weak heart. Are you safe? I'm at the hospital. Can you keep James tonight? I know I have no right to ask, but... He's safe with me. Take care of what you need to. That evening, I fed my grandson dinner, gave him a bath, read him stories. Normal grandfather activities that felt miraculous after months of exile. He fell asleep in my arms, and I carried him to his crib, marveling at how light innocence weighs. Mike and I spent the night reviewing security protocols. If Richard survived, he might blame me for his exposure. If Constantine got involved directly, professional threats could materialize. But sitting in James's nursery, watching him sleep, I felt only determination. This child would not grow up in a house of lies and potential murder. Saturday morning brought Elizabeth to my door. She looked haggard, aged 10 years overnight. James squealed, "Mama!" and she clutched him like a life preserver. "Can we talk?" she asked. I led her to the kitchen, pouring coffee while she settled James with toys. When she sat across from me, I saw my daughter clearly for the first time in months. The designer clothes couldn't hide her exhaustion. The perfect makeup couldn't conceal her fear. "I need to tell you everything," she began. "From the beginning. No lies, no excuses. Just truth." "I'm listening." She talked for 2 hours. How Richard's charm had swept her away. How his world of wealth and privilege had seemed like a fairy tale. How gradually he'd isolated her from me, convinced her that our blue-collar background was something shameful. The debts hidden until after marriage. The pressure to produce money they didn't have. "He said you were getting old anyway," she whispered. "That the money would just sit in banks while we struggled. He made it sound logical, like we were protecting your legacy by taking control." "When did you know about the life insurance?" Her face crumpled. "Last month. I found the papers and confronted him. He said it was just prudent planning that everyone did it. But Daddy, I also found the others. His aunt, who died policies on people I'd never met. I was going to leave him take James and run, but then you showed up at the baptism, and he said we were too far in to stop. Why didn't you call me, ask for help?" "Because I was ashamed. Because I'd chosen him over you. Because I'd said horrible things I can never take back." Tears flowed freely. "I called you pathetic. Daddy, you built everything from nothing, and I called you pathetic. How do you forgive that?" I reached across the table, taking her hand. "By remembering that love doesn't keep score. By understanding that good people can be manipulated by evil ones. By choosing to heal instead of hate. After everything I've done, Elizabeth, you're my daughter. That doesn't change because you made mistakes. But changes have to happen. Real changes." "I know. I'm filing for divorce Monday. And Daddy, I found more evidence. Richard's been stealing from his own family trust. His uncle Constantine doesn't know yet, but when he finds out..." "Constantine offered a deal yesterday, before Richard's heart attack." "Don't take it. Please. Let the criminal charges proceed. Richard needs to be stopped before he kills someone." She squeezed my hand. "I'll testify. About everything. The gaslighting, the schemes, all of it." We spent the weekend rebuilding. Not trust. That would take time. But foundation, the bedrock of love between parent and child that survives, even calculated betrayal. James played between us, innocent bridge across the chasm his parents had created. Sunday brought news that Richard's surgery had complications. He'd survived, but faced a long recovery. Constantine called that evening, his voice cold and precise. "The deal is withdrawn. My nephew's indiscretions have come to light. The family will handle him internally. Your daughter and grandson are under our protection now. No harm will come to them. And Richard will never trouble you again. You have my word." The line went dead. I understood. The Lawson family had their own justice system, and Richard had violated their code. Whatever happened next would occur in shadows far from courts and publicity. Part of me felt relieved. Another part wondered if I'd made a deal with different devils. Elizabeth moved back home that night into her childhood room. We put James in the nursery I'd prepared, and he fell asleep clutching the stuffed elephant I'd bought months ago. The rocking horse waited patiently, finally serving its purpose, as I rocked my grandson and sang the lullabies my mother had taught me. "Daddy," Elizabeth said from the doorway, "I know it'll take time, but I want to earn your trust again. Will you let me try?" "Already started," I said. "Tomorrow we'll begin transferring assets back where they belong. Tuesday, we'll meet with therapists. Wednesday, we'll have dinner like a normal family. One day at a time, rebuilding what Richard tried to destroy." She nodded, tears glistening. "I love you, Daddy." "Love you too, sweetheart. Always have, always will." The rocking horse creaked gently in the darkness, keeping time with the rhythm of redemption. 3 months later, I stood in the completed Riverside Plaza, watching the sun set over Pine Valley through floor-to-ceiling windows. The building that Richard had suggested for my accidental death had become a symbol of survival and success. Elizabeth and James would arrive soon for the dedication ceremony, along with 200 guests who'd witnessed our public humiliation at the baptism. Richard Lawson had vanished. Officially, he was recovering from heart surgery at a private facility in Switzerland. Unofficially, Constantine had made good on his promise. Richard would never trouble us again, living under what amounted to luxurious house arrest, his access to family funds contingent on staying far from Pine Valley and his abandoned family. The divorce had been swift and uncontested. Richard signed everything Elizabeth's lawyer presented, including termination of all parental rights to James. Constantine's influence reached far, ensuring his disgraced nephew created no obstacles to the family's desire for a clean break. Dr. Harrison Vance faced his own reckoning. Thomas Brennan had filed complaints with the medical board about preparing false competency evaluations. Vance's other victims emerged from Shadow's elderly parents, whose children had paid for convenient diagnoses. His license was suspended pending investigation, his reputation destroyed by the light we'd shone on his corruption. "Grandpa," James's voice echoed through the marble lobby. At 2.5, he'd grown verbal and vivacious, no longer the silent baby caught in adult schemes. He ran to me, and I swept him up, marveling at how much weight he'd gained under proper care. Elizabeth followed, transformed by these months of healing. She'd returned to nursing, working part-time at Pine Valley Medical Center while rebuilding her life. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by the practical warmth I remembered from her younger days. Therapy had helped us both process the trauma and betrayal, slowly stitching our relationship back together. "The place looks amazing, Dad," she said, genuine pride replacing the false sophistication Richard had taught her. "Wait until you see the family floor," I said, leading them to the elevator. "10th floor, best views in the valley." I'd designed the top floor as mixed-use space, part office, part family retreat. The western corner housed a playroom for James, visible from my executive suite through glass walls. No more separation between work and family. The roots of our near destruction lay in that artificial divide Richard had exploited. Guests began arriving for the dedication. Many were the same people who'd watched Elizabeth reject me at the baptism. Barbara Henley came early, wearing the smile of someone whose faith in justice had been restored. Father Michael blessed the building, making pointed comments about redemption and the power of truth to overcome deception. "Before we cut the ribbon," I said, addressing the assembled crowd, "I want to share why this building matters beyond mere construction. 4 months ago, I nearly lost everything that mattered. Not money or property, but family. Forces tried to destroy those bonds for profit, using lies and manipulation to turn loved ones against each other. Elizabeth stood beside me, James in her arms, no longer hiding from public judgment. She'd insisted on facing the same people who'd witnessed her cruelty, showing them her transformation. But truth has power. I continued. Love has resilience. And sometimes when darkness seems overwhelming, light breaks through in unexpected ways. This building stands as testament to survival, to the bonds between parent and child that withstand even calculated betrayal. It reminds us that what we build with integrity can't be destroyed by deception. The ribbon fell away, and applause echoed through the space. But the real victory wasn't in concrete and steel. It was in Elizabeth's hand, finding mine in James calling, "Grandpa," with pure joy in the second chance we'd carved from the wreckage of conspiracy. Later, as the reception wound down, Konstantin Lawson appeared like a shadow at the edge of celebration. He approached alone, his presence clearing space around him through sheer force of reputation. "Mr. Brennan," he said, voice cultured but cold. "The building is impressive." "Thank you." I came to deliver a message. My nephew sends his regards from Switzerland. He's found peace in meditation and solitude, far from the temptations that led him astray. The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning. "He'll trouble you no more." I appreciate the family's intervention. "We protect our own," Konstantin said, glancing at Elizabeth and James. "All our own. Your daughter and grandson remain under our aegis. Should anyone else attempt to harm them..." He didn't finish the threat. "Understood." He left as silently as he'd arrived, a guardian angel in Armani, ensuring our safety through fear rather than love. I'd made a bargain with necessary devils to protect what mattered most. "Who was that?" Elizabeth asked, though her expression suggested she knew. "Insurance," I said. "The kind that guarantees you and James stay safe." As guests departed, we retreated to the family space. James played with blocks on the carpet, building towers that defied physics through toddler determination. Elizabeth and I sat watching, comfortable in shared silence that had taken months to achieve. "I've been thinking," she said eventually, "about the money." "What money?" "The inheritance I tried to steal. I want you to put it all in trust for James. Ironclad, untouchable, until he's 25 and mature enough to handle it. I don't want any of it." "Elizabeth." "No, Dad. I need this. Need to prove I'm not here for money. I've got my nursing salary, and that's enough. More than enough. I learned what really matters isn't designer clothes or country club memberships. It's this." She gestured at James, at me, at the simple moment of family togetherness. "We'll see the lawyers tomorrow." I agreed. "Structure it however makes you comfortable. And Dad, I want to work for it. The relationship, I mean. Not assume forgiveness, but earn it. Every day with small acts and large choices. Will you let me?" "Already are," I said. "Every day you choose James over material things. Every shift you work, healing others, every moment you build instead of tear down. You're earning it." James toddled over with his masterpiece, a precarious tower of blocks that somehow stood despite improbable angles. "Look, Grandpa, big." "Very big." I agreed, helping him place another block on top. "And strong. Built on good foundation." Elizabeth smiled, understanding the metaphor. We were rebuilding too, block by careful block, creating something stronger for having been tested. The conspiracy that nearly destroyed us had instead revealed the bedrock beneath love that endured betrayal, trust that could be rebuilt, bonds that money couldn't buy or break. As night fell over Pine Valley, I stood at those windows with my daughter and grandson looking out at the lights below. Somewhere in Switzerland, Richard Lawson faced his own darkness, exiled from the life he'd schemed to steal. Dr. Vance faced disgrace and probable prosecution. The other conspirators had scattered like roaches when light flooded their hiding places. "Tell me a story, Grandpa," James demanded, climbing into my lap. "Once upon a time," I began, "there was a builder who loved his family more than all the buildings he could build." Elizabeth curled beside us on the couch, and I told a simplified version of our story. How bad people tried to steal good things, but love proved stronger than greed. How mistakes could be forgiven when hearts truly changed. How families broken could be rebuilt stronger at the mended places. James fell asleep before I finished, secure in the safety we'd fought to preserve. Elizabeth took him to the playroom's quiet corner, settling him on the small bed I'd installed for such moments. She returned with tears in her eyes. "Dad, can you ever truly forgive me? Not just say it, but feel it." Sweetheart, forgiveness isn't a destination. It's a journey we take together. Every day gets us closer. And look how far we've already come. She hugged me. Then the first real embrace since that horrible day at the baptism. I felt the little girl she'd been, and the woman she was becoming, scarred, but stronger, wiser for her wandering in darkness. I love you, Daddy. Love you too, Elizabeth. Always have. Always will. We sat in comfortable silence watching James sleep, guarding his innocence from the shadows that had nearly consumed us. The building hummed around us, testament to what could be constructed from strong foundations and honest work. But the real construction was this: a family rebuilt, a future reclaimed, a love that survived even the most calculated betrayal. Marcus called as I drove home. Thought you'd want to know. That life insurance company is under investigation. Seems Dr. Vance wasn't their only corrupt connection. The dominoes are falling, Gustav. Good. Maybe other families will be spared what we endured. You did that. By standing firm, documenting everything, refusing to be a victim. You saved more than just yourself. After we hung up, I reflected on his words. Perhaps that was the ultimate victory. Not just surviving the conspiracy, but exposing it so others could be protected. The rocking horse waited at home, no longer lonely, but purposeful, James's favorite perch for story time. The workshop held new projects, a toy chest, a bookshelf, gifts of love, rather than desperate hope. The war was over. We'd won by refusing to become what our enemies wanted, broken, bitter, divided. Instead, we chose healing, chose forgiveness, chose the harder path of rebuilding trust. Elizabeth worked for redemption with the same determination she'd once applied to destruction. James grew surrounded by love instead of schemes. And me, I learned that sometimes the greatest strength is admitting vulnerability, that documenting truth defeats elaborate lies, and that love, real love, survives even the darkest betrayals. The Silver Cross, 4 generations of Brennan heritage, now waited in James's nursery, ready to pass on when he was old enough to understand its weight. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I thought to all who'd witnessed our story, life tests us in unexpected ways through people we'd never suspect. But truth endures, love persists, and justice, though sometimes delayed, does prevail. Guard your families, document your lives, and never let anyone convince you that standing firm for what's right makes you weak. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is showing them that actions have consequences, that redemption is possible, and that love means holding people accountable while holding the door open for their return. What would you have done in my place? When family turns predator, when love becomes a weapon, when trust is shattered by those who should guard it most carefully? Share your thoughts below. And if this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Help others find this message of hope amid betrayal of strength, through vulnerability of families rebuilt from ashes of conspiracy. Until next time, hold your loved ones close, but keep your documents closer. God bless.